My name's Carol, and I'm here to help you make bread. My passion is teaching people to make bread. I think everybody should make bread, and so we have a really simplified method. And this is what we'll do. We're going to start by making a basic mix. To make a basic mix, you start with 5 pounds of flour. This can be almost any kind of flour except self-rising or pastry. Okay? We add yeast, and you'll have the recipe available to you. We add some salt, and that's actually all you need to make bread, except the water. Now we'll add 2 optional ingredients. We'll add some powdered milk for nourishment. And the powdered milk also has another purpose. If you notice, it's very, very granular, whereas the flour is very, very smooth. So that when you start mixing your dry mix together, you can tell whether it's evenly mixed because you'll feel the granules with your fingers. And we add malt for extra flavor. I want you to know that bread dough is very, very, very forgiving. It is easy to use. It's lots of fun. All right, now we're going to mix this. So we mix and go around the outside edges, and again, you'll see that the powdered milk just sort of disappears, but you can feel it with your fingers. So this is thoroughly mixed. This is the basic mix. With this you can make rolls, pizza, pita, just by adding oil and water. That's all you have to do. So now we will put the basic mix, except for 6 cups, back into the bag. And it's important that you label your bag bread mix so that you don't use it as flour. So I'm going to take 6 cups of the mix and put it in a mixing bowl, and the rest goes back in the bag. Now, when you take your flour out, fluff it up like this so that you don't pack it in. Fluff it up, scoop it off, and dump it in. Six cups. Now, the rest of this will go back into the bag. And next thing to do is add water. The water has to be warm. We're going to take 4 cups of this water, which is just a little warmer than body temperature. And we're not going to use all this water, but it's easy to start with a quart. We start by making a hole in the middle. And if you ever mix concrete or cement, it's just very, very similar, about the same thing. And then you add about 2 cups of water. Bread's very, very forgiving. You don't have to be perfect. And you mix that in. As it starts getting absorbed, you add about another ½ cup. Now, we should add some oil to this, and you always add the oil to the water. You don't pour it on the dry flour because it would lump. And you add about a tablespoon, but you don't have to measure it. And then you start mixing again. Okay, so you incorporate it. All right, you got some. You add a little bit more water. Add water about half a cup at a time. Add it to the dry flour. So this is getting about where you want it to be. Flour is all incorporated. It's all damp. We will. Now this next step I call getting ready to pre-knead. All right, now what you do next is you scrape all the dough to one side of the pan. You won't find this in any cookbook, but it really, really makes a big difference. I call it making the skin. And if you treat that skin like a baby's bottom, never break the skin, you won't get your hands all sticky when you start kneading. So you've got everything scraped down to one side. Now you take your flour, and you can flour the whole thing liberally. Then you turn your bowl 180 degrees and scrape that mass down to the other side. What you're trying to do is make a ball of dough that has a skin, very thin skin of flour on the outside. What you want to be able to do is roll that ball of dough around and around and around. Now you're ready to dump the dough onto your mixing surface. I'll be working up here now. So what you do is you put some flour where you're going to start your work. And this now is released from the pan, you just dump it. You take your scraper and really clean the bowl, because you still got a lot of good dough in there. You sort of make a little hole in the dough you've dumped out and dumped all that stuff out. This is now empty. You pick up the dough and you go around and around and around using the backs of your fingers and the fingertips, around and around. It's very, very soft. Go around and around and around. Anytime it sticks, we loosen it. Now this is pre-kneading. This is not kneading yet, and you're being very, very, very gentle. Don't break the baby's skin. Very gentle. It's not like they say take your aggressions out on it. Not yet. You can do that later. But right now it's round and around and very, very gentle. Now you see that it's beginning to develop some substance and elasticity. Now we can start kneading. Make sure that we're not stuck to the bottom here. And kneading, again, very, very gentle, is picking up the far side, bringing it all the way to the near side. Flour the palms of your hand and push it away from you. Pick it up, far to near, push. Pick it up, far to near, and push. But again, very, very, very gentle. If you push too hard, you're going to break the skin and the dough will stick to you. Pick it up all the way over to here.
Okay.
Flour your hands if you have to, then right on top of this crease, push it away from you again.
Okay.
Pick it up, far to near, push, pick it up. We can start kneading a little bit faster, but again, still very, very gently. But you can see that we're getting some elasticity in this. This kneading usually takes about 5 minutes. But still, being very, very gentle. If I push down hard now, I'd still go through that skin and get dough all over my hands. And I don't, if you do that, you're not doing it right. So it's developing some elasticity and resistance. And I want, when you push your finger in, it bounces back. Try that. That means, see how it bounces back up? That means that your dough is pretty well kneaded. Now is the time, if you want to show it who's boss. I mean, this is what you read about all the time. You go. You can really beat it up once you've gotten to the point where it has some elasticity and is not going to stick to your hand. All right, so that's well kneaded. And what we do now is put it back in the pan that you have not washed, and we will let it rise. You have to grease the pan. I use the spray grease because it's easy. All right, so that's well greased. We put the bread in, and then we turn it over. And that means that you've greased the top. Now, we'll put a damp towel on top. And now we're going to put it in the dishwasher, a clean dishwasher, to let it rise 1 hour. Before we put it in the dishwasher, we're going to add some hot water, just a couple of quarts, which will add moisture and heat and make this a perfect place to raise bread. So that's just plain water. And here's the dough. And we close it. And we let it raise for 1 hour. Now, to determine if it's risen enough, you poke another hole and it stays. And you see that it's all beginning to drop down a little bit. So flour your fingers, and this is called knocking down. Next, we dump this out. This is a flour that's risen for an hour. We're going to cut this in half because this is enough for 2 loaves of bread, or 1 loaf of bread and a dozen English muffins. So we're using our scraper. Cut this in half. Here's our bread tin, and we have to add grease so the bread won't stick. We've got the grease in the pan, and then make sure it's in the corners. Now to shape the loaf, a little more flour, and you just want to sort of roll it up into a log, all right? And make sure it's that seam is creased and stuck to itself. If the surface isn't smooth enough, you can sort of tuck it back under like this until you get the smooth surface you want. Tuck it under and pinch it. And that's pretty much like a loaf shape. You put it in the bread tin, flour your hand again, and punch it down. You want it into the corners of the bread pan. You want to add a little water here so that the top doesn't dry out. We're going to put the bread in the oven. And turn the temperature to 400 degrees. And set the timer for 20 minutes. We're going to check the bread. It's been in almost 20 minutes. We're almost ready to turn the heat down to 375. We'll see what the bread looks like. Ah, it's coming along nicely. So put it back, and we'll turn the heat down to 375. It'll now cook another 25-30 minutes. So the other half of the dough could either be another loaf of bread or it could be English muffins. And what we're going to do is do English muffins. All right, this is the dough that's been rising since for 1 hour. Half of this dough we're baking as a loaf of bread, and this other half we're going to turn into English muffins. Now, to make English muffins, you roll the dough into a log about the diameter of the muffin you want. All right? And then you take some dental floss. Oh. Using the dental floss, you cut off nickels. And these will be your muffins. Bring your thread right up over the other piece and cut and lift off. Cut and lift off. That didn't want to lift off very well. So these English muffins will cook on the griddle, which is preheating. This is a Teflon coated griddle. And you'll cook these exactly like a pancake. If you cooked a pancake, you can cook an English muffin. And we'll put a little cornmeal here. This is not grease, but wrong thing here. They don't have any tendency to stick at all for some reason, some very nice reason. I don't know why. Okay, that's about all we can get on this right now. The temperature is medium-high. Get our spatula out. So that's all there is to it. You look at on these though, you just check the bottom, and you can see that that's ready to be turned. That's almost ready, so you just have to check. This is the hottest part of the griddle. The others are not, and you want to give them enough time. And again, like a pancake, they change from shiny to dull when they're getting ready to, almost ready to turn. We're going to take them off and let them cool. Bread is done when the internal temperature is 192 degrees. So there's our bread. We dump it out. Now another way to tell whether it's done is by tapping the bottom. Can you hear that? It sounds hollow. And then the other way is to have a thermometer, which we happen to have here, and you insert it horizontally towards one end so you don't make a mess of the whole bread. And we'll see if it comes up to 192. Okay, so there it is, 192. Our bread is done. Turn the oven off, take the bread out. Now, on fresh baked bread, make sure you let it cool thoroughly before you store it. And don't store it in plastic if it's the least bit warm, because the moisture will condense and it'll mildew. If you have to carry fresh bread anyplace, put it in a brown paper bag. And so there we are. We've got English muffins, and we've got bread, and I don't think it took all that long. I wish you great baking, and I certainly hope you try this on your own.